So last week I uploaded a video talking about my struggles as an autistic person. And yes, I think there are a lot of struggles that come with being autistic, but there are a lot of good things too. And I think it's really important to talk about that, especially right now with how much negativity and misinformation is being spread about autism. Autism is not a disease that needs to be cured. Autism is a neurotype, and it literally describes how my brain developed and how my brain processes information, sensory input, and communication. I could not exist the way that I do if I was not autistic. Because autism isn't something that I have, it's something that I am. And if I could change the fact that I was autistic, I wouldn't want to. So I want to talk about some of the positive traits about my autism. These are things that I love about myself and that I loved even before I knew that they were autistic traits. But now I love them even more because I know that they're autistic traits, because it means that other autistic people have similar experiences and joys, and we all get to share in that together. So let's get right into it. My first trait that I really love about myself is how I experience sensory input, especially music. There are a lot of videos going around social media right now that are talking about the contradictions of being neurodivergent, especially autistic and ADHD. And one of them is that I hate loud sounds, but I love blasting loud music in my headphones. And for me, that's like so true. I think this is because the way I process sensory information, particularly sound, is that I hear every single sound in my environment. So I have a really hard time picking out specific sounds when there's just like a lot of noise around me, because I'm hearing everything at like the same level. I actually watched a video the other day that an artist made talking about his experience with like sound in a public place, and I'll link that down below. But basically it was the idea that when neurotypical people are like in a busy cafe, they kind of hear like the sounds of the cafe or the music playing or the cars outside, but they can hone in on the conversation right in front of them and hear that and focus on that. That's not the case for me. I hear everything happening at the same volume. And so I've gotten really good at like reading people's lips when I'm talking to them, because that's how I can pick out the sound of them speaking a little bit more easily. So COVID was a little bit of a nightmare when everybody was wearing masks and I couldn't really read lips anymore. But because I hear every single sound and I can hear many layers of sound, when I put my focus on one specific song, like if I have my headphones in and all I'm listening to is just that song, I can hear every layer of the music. I can hear the bass and the treble and the drums and the vocals. And when I hear like a particularly good song, it just like hits that sweet spot in my brain and it makes me feel absolutely euphoric. Like I can't even describe it. Music has been probably my main form of stimming for my entire life. Like even before I had any idea what stimming was and that I was autistic, I can kind of trace it back through my history and be like, okay, I used to always use music as a way to regulate myself. I remember being in middle school and I had a really hard time in middle school. I was really depressed and anxious. And that was also the time that I was really getting into music and discovering new music and listening to different types of music and like having my favorite bands and wanting to go to concerts and stuff. And I remember in middle school, I had an iPod, but like we weren't allowed to have our iPods or our cell phones or anything with us in school, in class. We weren't allowed to ever have headphones in or listen to music. And sometimes I would sneak earbuds on the playground. And I definitely got in trouble for that a couple times, because when I was really anxious and really stressed, I would get hooked on certain songs and they would play on loop over and over in my head all day throughout the school day until I could finally get home and put my headphones on and just listen to that song on repeat for like hours at a time. I hope that schools are a little bit more lenient with headphones and stuff now, particularly for like kids on the spectrum. In high school, I remember I had more availability. Like I was allowed more often to like listen to music while I was doing work, and that really helped me focus and such. So I hope that like autistic kids can do that more often now, because I really struggled not really being able to have that STEM present with me throughout the school day when I already struggled with school. I listen to all different types of music, and I actually really enjoy live music, but I always wear earplugs when I go to concerts because the volume of the music is just too loud, and it's never just the music. It's always like the loud crowds and everything too. But I love being with people at shows, especially when it's an artist I really like, and a lot of people are there that also really like the artist, and I just feel like we're all really connected in that. I also really enjoy watching movies for the same reason, because of the way I process like sensory input. When I watch a movie that has like really great visuals and cinematography and a really good story, and you pair that with an awesome soundtrack, it just like hits that spot in my brain that just makes me feel so good. The next trait that I love about myself that stems from my autism is my hyperempathy and feeling emotions very deeply. So I think it is a misconception that autistic people lack empathy. I think there are some autistic people that struggle more with empathy, but just like any other trait of the spectrum, like there's people on all sides of it, and it usually to an extreme. So you may feel not very much empathy at all, or you may be like me where you feel like hyper empathy and you feel emotions very strongly. I think also this misconception about empathy actually comes from the misunderstanding of like egocentrism in autism, and the fact that like egocentrism basically means you kind of have tunnel vision, like you have your bubble that you're in and you're really focused on like what you're doing and what you've got going on, and you have less awareness of the other people around you and what they've got going on. But that's not the same as lacking empathy. It's just kind of like tunnel vision bubble thing. I can get into that in another video at some point because I'm really interested in the concept of egocentrism and autism and how misunderstood it is, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about empathy and the fact that I generally, like, I feel emotions so deeply. Like they are all consuming. When I feel sad, it's like the only thing I can see. And it used to be really easy for me to slip into periods of depression, especially because being burnt out, being exhausted from other aspects of my autism, I would start to feel sad and overwhelmed, and then that would just consume me and I would be stuck there for a while. Now that I'm older and I kind of can see what's happening, I can see these patterns of emotions happening in me, I can kind of guide myself in other directions and not get so stuck in feelings. But yeah, I just feel feelings so strongly and deeply. But this, along with sadness, this also goes for joy. So I feel joy so deeply. I feel it in every part of my body to the point that I feel like it wants to explode out of me, and I just have to share it with other people and express it through like stimming or other ways. But this feeling of hyperempathy, of like feeling other people's emotions too, I think that's something that comes from my own personal trauma and my people-pleasing tendencies. I got really good at reading other people so I could be exactly what they needed me to be in any given moment. And I kind of talked about my struggles with that in the last video I uploaded, if you're interested in watching that. But I also think that maybe my people-pleasing tendencies also came from the fact that I'm very empathetic and I feel emotions very deeply. So like I will literally see a person or an animal, real or fictional, experiencing any emotion, and I will begin to feel that emotion as if it were my own. When I was younger, it was really hard to differentiate between my emotions and the emotions of other people, and I think I struggled a lot because of that. But again, as I've gotten older, it's gotten easier for me to tell, okay, this is my feelings, this is the feelings of the people around me, and I need to kind of like separate the two and not get overwhelmed with how other people are feeling. But I think now that I can do that, now that I can kind of differentiate, it doesn't feel as much of a struggle. It feels more like a superpower of like, okay, I can relate and connect to other people more easily because I can read their emotions a little bit better and feel what they're feeling. And I can understand better and be like less judgmental. And that kind of goes into my next trait that I really like about myself. And that is my infinite curiosity and my drive to understand. I think there's a bit of a stereotype that autistic people ask too many questions, and a lot of autistic people have heard from parents, teachers, bosses that they need to stop questioning their authority. But I think it's because we are misunderstood. When I ask a lot of questions, it's not about authority or who's in control or power or whatever. It's about my curiosity and my need to understand, like, why are you doing things this way? I have always had this drive to understand like how things physically work And when I was younger, I would even take apart my toys just to understand like how they worked. And then I'd put them back together, and I just felt better because I knew what was going on in the inner workings. And like, I've always been really interested in like human anatomy. I've been really interested in psychology and why people reason the way they do, why they make decisions the way they do, how their past affects their current decisions, and just wanting to know more and more. When I was younger and I first started getting more obsessed with movies, I would also get really obsessed with the behind the scenes footage of how they made the movies and how they did the special effects and everything. I loved like special effects makeup especially, and I got really into makeup for a while because of that. I remember being like 5 years old and so excited to go to kindergarten and go to school. Because I was just so excited to learn. And I think it's really unfortunate that school was so difficult and inaccessible to me because I had no awareness that I was disabled at the time. Because then that system of learning that just wasn't working for me kind of killed my desire to learn for a while. But I am so grateful that I am growing up in the era of the internet, because that means anything that I want to learn, I can just go online and teach myself. And I have done that so many times throughout my life with different skills. I've just taught myself how to do things because I wanted to. And I think this kind of crosses over with the empathy thing, because my sense of curiosity and this like drive to understand lets me be less judgmental of people, because I've always just been interested in psychology and I want to know like how people's minds work and stuff. So all of these things feel very interconnected with like who I am. And that actually kind of goes into my next trait that I really like about myself. And that is my pattern recognition and my attention to detail. So I feel like this trait goes along with my drive to understand. Like the way my brain sorts and understands information is usually in the form of patterns. And I feel like more things in life fall into patterns than not. Like human behavior, for example. It's very much ruled by patterns. I got really good at socializing and masking because I learned neurotypical behaviors of or patterns of behavior, and I mimicked them back to people so that I could be more socially accepted. But I've also come to understand my autism by the patterns of behavior that I and other autistic people naturally fall into. So that's kind of helped me with the unmasking process and like allow myself to show up more authentically as my autistic self. But I particularly like this trait because it helps me with a lot of the things I enjoy about life. And maybe I enjoy these things because I have this trait, but they definitely kind of go hand in hand. And some of my hobbies include writing, fitness, and crochet. And these are all things that can be broken down into patterns. So story structure and plot beats are all patterns that books and movies can fall into. Like I'm that annoying friend that watches 20 minutes of a movie and then predicts the ending because I'm so interested in story structure, and my attention to detail will help me notice like subtle foreshadowing or symbolism within the story that's gonna kind of predict where the story is gonna go. Fitness is another thing that contains a lot of patterns. Our bodies naturally have different movement patterns, or we can kind of fall into like incorrect movement patterns through the ways we live our daily life. And as a personal trainer, I get to work with people to help kind of correct those movement patterns and have more proper form in their workouts and such, or even just through their movement patterns in daily life. I do a lot of that in my day job. And sometimes my attention to detail can kind of get in the way of being a good trainer, because sometimes I can get caught up in the minutia of movement patterns. And I've just had to work on that the more that I've been training with people. Just like everybody's body is going to move slightly differently. And yes, there are these patterns, these larger patterns that we fall into, but depending on your anatomy, depending on like your age, depending on any kind of like conditions of your anatomy and structure, your movement pattern is going to be slightly different. So I can't get too caught up in those details. And then crochet, obviously a very pattern-oriented hobby. I first picked it up about 1.5 years ago, and it came very easily to me because my brain enjoys following the patterns. And because I have such a close attention to detail, I hardly ever miss stitches. They're usually very uniform, and my final products look very clean, even in the beginning when I was first learning how to crochet. So it just, again, hits me right in the right spot in the brain where I'm like, ooh, this makes sense. This feels good. So yeah, that's, I feel like I've gotten a little rambly as I've made this video just because I'm getting like excited talking about these things, but that's 4 autistic traits that make me the person that I am. I've been doing a lot of work to be kinder to myself and show up with love for myself, especially after my diagnosis. It can be really difficult sometimes because there are a lot of aspects of being autistic that just clash with the way society works, and that disables me. It can be easy to fall into self-loathing and beating myself up like I'm the problem for just being who I am, when really it's just the fact that the world wasn't designed with people like me in mind. I hope that if you are struggling with that feeling right now, that this video can shine some light on the good aspects of being autistic. I would love to hear your experiences in the comments below, and if you have other autistic traits that you love about yourself, please let me know. We have to keep sharing our stories and uplifting one another. Thank you so much for watching this video and sharing your time with me today. Please continue to take care of yourself. I love you so much. Bye.